The strongest human versus the strongest superhero. Sportacus versus Homelander. Peak athletic ability versus the milk muncher himself. It's currently a topic that's kind of popping somewhat on Twitter, and I thought I would just shed some light on it and get to the truth of the matter. So who would actually win? Now, starting with Homelander, who's a bit easier to talk about scaling-wise, we have some pretty easy metrics to go off of. Now, we can pretty much use every superhero besides Homelander as a reference because he stands at the apex of superhero society. So he does generally upscale from all their feats, with maybe minor exceptions here or there. An example of this is Soldier Boy's explosion that destroyed Vought Tower. This has been calced to building level and something Homelander would just scale to, as even Queen Maeve could survive it. Now, this should give us a good baseline, as we do have higher interpretations for Homelander's strength. You can maybe look at The Art of Making the Boys Definitive Guidebook. Discusses how Homelander has the ability to level a city in minutes. Although this doesn't mean that each punch is city level. This can be referencing his abilities as a whole, or him holistically, being able to fly through buildings, laser buildings in half and whatnot. So each of his punches don't really scale to this city level. This is something he can achieve over time. A common reference point that a lot of people use for Homelander in terms of durability and IP is that he's able to tank an explosion point blank that leveled a chemical plant without any real damage. I will say though, that does not mean that his striking power or AP really scales to these explosions. These are more durability feats, and the fact that these aren't really shown on screen or he isn't displayed to be this strong in the actual series it makes it a little harder to use these high ends, especially for his AP, which probably backscales closer to that building level if you want to use the Soldier Boy blowing up a building as a reference point. Although I think the general range for Homelander is building level on an extreme low end, and then multi-city block level for more consistency. And then if you want to highball it, you could just say he can level a city or survive weapons from the US military that could potentially level a city. Although Stillwell doesn't outright say that they hit Homelander, they just said they threw them at him. But if you want to say like the implication is, okay, they hit him, then I think that's also perfectly fine. Homelander's speed is kind of another matter, since his combat speed actually isn't quite that impressive. A lot of his better speed showings actually come from his flying or travel speed. An example of this is when he's flying, searching around for translucent, and he flew at Mach 1.5, despite the fact that most characters just don't have that level of combat speed in the actual show. This being further supplemented by the idea that A-Train is somebody who actually scales in combat speed to his running speed, as we see later on in the show. Every statement surrounding Homelander, like him breaking the sound barrier when he was 8, can also just be in reference to his flight speed. Doesn't mean he punched and broke the sound barrier. So I think it's just more consistent to say he flies at these speeds rather than punches at these hypersonic speeds. The best feat from Homelander is when he actually saves Billy Butcher after Billy had planted a explosive vest on Madeline Stillwell, with Homelander actually saving Butcher from the explosion. This feat being calced to Mach 10.28 to 18.2. I will note though, again, it's probably more likely him flying at these speeds rather than him punching at them. But if you wanted to say maybe his reaction scale here, I think that's entirely fine. But given the consistency of Homelander, I think this being him in flight makes a lot more sense, especially since he would have just flown to Butcher and grabbed him before the explosion went off. Homelander's most consistent avenues are multi-city block level to potentially city level on a higher end if you want to take some of the statements or higher interpretations of him, with his travel speed ranging from Mach 10.28 to 18.2. The reason Homelander flying around is also relevant is because in character he does just fly around and shoot lasers at people, so he probably just does this in most fights when he doesn't really feel the need to directly confront whoever he wants to fight. Homelander really doesn't need to fight most people, and he doesn't in character. He just lasers them and flies away, since nobody's really in his tax bracket anyway, so this is relevant to the discussion at hand. Now for Sportacus' stats, this is a bit different. In terms of speed, Sportacus has some decent showings, as being shown to outrun a cannonball, a feat that has been calced to 131.69 meters per second, which is at least subsonic. This is a speed range faster than the eye can see, ranging from 76 to 383 miles per hour. This is consistent with Sportacus' other showings, such as being able to run 22.7 times faster than Robbie Ryan, who, if you can assume, runs as fast as the average human, which is 15 miles per hour without tire. Sportacus should be able to run 340.6 miles per hour. This is in travel speed and reaction time, so it's actually possible that Sportacus' combat speed could actually scale much higher than this. For a reference, A-Train has an explicit running speed of 371 meters per second, which was done after he was amped up on Compound V, velocity. This translates to 829.903 miles per hour. If you're under the idea that A-Train is faster than Homelander when you're not including flying, so he can just throw punches and run faster than Homelander, which does put into question where exactly Homelander's striking speed and combat speed generally scale stat-wise. The fact that lower level heroes are able to consistently tag him does kind of lead me to the idea it probably doesn't scale quite as high as his travel speed, which makes it so Sportacus does have the potential to actually catch Homelander off guard, or isn't so below him that he couldn't tag him potentially. Although I will admit Homelander should have a bit of a speed edge in this department. Now, in terms of strength feats, Sportacus does have some good feats. He launches a space shuttle which almost ran out of fuel from the moon to Earth, which, considering the escape velocity of the moon and the weight of the shuttle, this does come out to a city block level plus feat, which is really impressive. If you want to look at another feat, one of Sportacus's better strength showings is tilting a pyramid up after eating an apple. We'll talk about the apple amp in just a second, but it's kind of ridiculous. For reference, the Great Pyramid of Giza is estimated to weigh around 5,955,000 tons, which is honestly way more impressive than a lot of on-screen strength feats from Homelander himself. I'm not saying Homelander couldn't perform this feat, I'm just saying he hasn't been shown to perform something to this level. The pyramid feat also did just get outright calc to city block level plus if you wanted more of a quantification for it, which isn't quite on the level of Homelander, but still is pretty good stock for Sportacus strength-wise. Now, if you want to take a potential peak for Sportacus and don't consider this an outlier, and I don't think it's an outlier for another reason I'll mention in a second, but Sportacus should scale above Robbie Rotten, as he stated by himself and other members of the cast to be the healthiest and most fit in Lazy Town, so he should be physically superior to Robbie Rotten. And this isn't an insignificant feat, as Robbie Rotten has consistently survived being attacked by his traps backfiring on him on more than one occasion, such as point-blank explosions that Sportacus can just eat pretty much no difficulty. This being relevant since Robbie Rotten can survive one of his traps malfunctioning or misfiring and being blasted to the moon, which on the absolute lowest end of the spectrum comes out to 38 megatons, or a city level durability feat. This isn't really a one and done or inconsistency for Lazy Town, as Sportacus has shown the ability to hit an apple with a baseball bat all the way to the moon, which to do this requires 57.863 kilotons of force, which is a town level feat, or the speed of the apple moving actually comes out to just under 20% the speed of light, or relativistic. So what we can gather is that if you go off these higher end feats for Sportacus and Robbie Rotten, Sportacus may actually just be too durable for Homelander to even damage. Like, them obliques gotta be crazy, you know what I'm saying? He may actually just break his own arm just trying to punch Sportacus. This would generally put Sportacus in a range to where Homelander couldn't just rip him apart with his physical strength. His laser vision may be more questionable. We've seen characters tank his laser beams or just survive them. However, we do know that Homelander likely does decrease the power of his laser beams. For example, when he just shoots one at Victoria Newman, he's probably not going full throttle there. With that being said though, I do think Sportacus consistently does have higher interpretations for his strength, especially if you go off the moon feat. It just puts him at way too durable for Homelander to deal with. Even if you want to say Homelander's slightly faster via traveling around, which may not even really matter if you go off the baseball feat. Like, Sportacus may just be able to snipe Homelander out of the air with a baseball bat and apple, unironically. Now, I will say, you do have to mention the apple amp that Sportacus gets. Sportacus can essentially amp himself further if he does eat like a sports candy, or, you know, what he considers sports candy, which is just a fruit or an apple, which is noted to be the source of Sportacus's power. Whenever he's exposed to this, his physical stats just increase astronomically. This is relevant due to how some of the feats on this list were performed by Apple amped Sportacus. So you kind of do have to look at that. Like, even if Homelander did have a slight edge or had some sort of stat edge on a general consensus or, you know, general baseline for Sportacus, the Apple amp would probably just propel him above whatever Homelander is at, like, stat-wise. The reason this is kind of weird to discuss is because the amp that Apple can give Sportacus does vary. Like, there's points where Sportacus needs an apple to lift a giant rock, and he's also able to lift a pyramid with the apple amp. So the apple amp is actually variable. It doesn't seem to be a strict stat multiplier. It seems to just be based on whatever task is at hand. So even if Homelander actually did outstat Sportacus, the apple amp would just propel Sportacus beyond that. So overall, if you do look at a composite Sportacus, he would just get an ab workout of Homelander trying to damage him and just do Pilates over him. If you did say Homelander was possibly superior from a stat perspective, due to how drastically the Apple amp can raise Sportacus to where he could just perform all of these feats, and not all of them are even performed, but the Apple amp, it would more than likely propel him above what Homelander is capable of. That's the video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. I sure did. Let me know what you guys think down below. Like and subscribe if you want peak quality content like this, or don't. I mean, it is what it is. But hey, man, Sportacus slams. I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.